Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Wendigo and Cryptids encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by you/Verovan94. Creature on Back Road. If you read my first encounter, or whatever you want to call it, well, this all happened just about 7 kilometers down the road from that. A few years later I was out hunting with a friend when we lost legal light. So we hiked back to the truck and hit the road in his parents' new Ford half-ton, the ones with the sensors all over the vehicle. We had some music playing as we were just heading back towards town again, when the music started acting weird and cutting in and out with static, so me being in the passenger seat, disconnected the Bluetooth and reconnected the phone. Music cleared up and we continued down the road. We got up to the KM board on the road that my previous encounter took place and I mentioned, "Oh hey, that's the whistle block that we logged a couple years back." Half jokingly because I couldn't make heads or tails of it. My friend replied, "Griayat, thanks for that," as I had told him the story before. We continued slowly driving down the road because it gets pretty rough in a couple spots and the road has a few sharp turns and an S-bend. Well, we go about a kilometer further and the music starts screeching and doing what we can only describe as alien noises. So I disconnect the Bluetooth again. My friend says, "Oh, Mom's got a cord in here." So he stops and gets the cord for me. I plug the phone in and play music again. Another kilometer down the road and the phone goes ape SHT. I mean loud alien squealing and sounds similar to that SHTTY dial-up internet noise from the 90s. We had started into the S-bend when this was happening and we shut the music off completely as we are driving still, making the one half of the S-turn, and then we both look up from the music deck/screen and the headlight illuminate a figure standing in the middle of the road. So we swerve and take the ditch a bit, still going probably 30 kilometers per hour, and get the truck back up on the road. We continue coasting down the road as we are both in awe after just seeing a flash of this thing. I finally say after what seemed like 5 quiet minutes, "Man, did you just see?" My friend cuts me off and says, "Kin skeleton in the middle of the road?" I say, "Yeah. Like a white rib cage, and a deer skull for a face." He finishes. I said, "Turn around, what the FCK was that? Does someone need our help?" Not thinking that we are in the middle of nowhere, with no vehicles around or any that we had passed from other hunters. It was early season and no one bow hunts here anyways. My friend said, "I'm not turning around, I feel sick. Like I'm going to throw up." And he continued driving. We didn't see another vehicle until we hit pavement again. It was taller than the pickup by easily a couple feet. I'm 6 feet 1 inch and my forehead is at the top of the window for reference. It has black surrounding the white of the bones with long arms half stretched to its sides as if it was saying, "Try and hit me." I watched this thing pass the passenger window and stared up at it as we wailed by it, and it was definitely 3-dimensional, tall with long arms and dark. Dead looking. Like light was sucked into it without reflecting anything. Hard to explain. When we hit service again, my friend received a text message from his mother saying, "What did you two idiots hit in my brand new truck?" I guess the new Ford send near accident reports to the owner when the sensors pick up something. I'm an old school Chevy guy, so I don't know, haha. The only thing I can find online that resembles what we both saw is a Wendigo without the antlers. Or the headlights didn't illuminate them anyway. Second story. This story was shared by you/embarrassed_yem_3534. Wendigos are coming back now, we can't escape. I'm from a small town, so you might not know about this. I'm living with my parents. Was living with my parents anyway, so I am interested in cryptozoology. Wendigos, skinwalkers, all that. My friend came to me the other day and told me about this creature he saw with a deer skull outside of his house. His house is 2 houses down. It was a Wendigo. I told him what it was and what it does. He wanted to vomit, I wanted to vomit. We waited for a couple more days. We waited and waited until something happened. A park was near us a couple of miles from us. A couple was killed there and only their child emerged. It was a child no more than 7 or 8 years old, blonde, you get the picture. We pulled her aside and asked her what happened. She said something that will haunt me to my grave. She said that a deer skull creature had come to the park and told her to play with it. The parents played too. The girls said that they played hide and seek. She hid in a broken tree. I asked her what did she do after that, and she said she was never found, and then she came from the park. She said something horrifying. She said she heard her parents scream and then she heard tearing, splattering and screams of agony. Then some staff came over and pulled her aside. Before she could go, I asked her, I said, "How did it not kill you?" She said, "Because it wasn't there." A couple more days and about 34 children and 26 adults have been murdered, and there have been sightings of over 40 Wendigos eating, chatting. Me and my friends have decided enough is enough. We brought guns, flamethrowers, explosives. My friend, let's name him Ryan, he stockpiled on hundreds of shotgun shells, a Saga 12, AK-47, Glocks and a homemade bomb. I got another friend. He took a lot of begging, but he agreed. We went to a park that was a hotspot for Wendigos. We found 4 bodies unknown. We went on and found a forest and we said, okay, this is probably it. We went into the forest. We brought a Dodge Hellcat if we needed to escape. We ran for over a mile and slowed down and set camp. Ryan told me about eyes in the forest following us. My other friend, let's call him Scott, he was seeing dead, mangled animals on the ground. We found our first Wendigo. We went into the forest and found the Wendigo. It moved at unbelievable speeds at well over 100 miles per hour. We let Ryan unleash his Saga 12. The Wendigo let out horrid screams. I quickly pulled out a flamethrower and burned it alive. We sat there for 15 minutes as the Wendigo was cooking and screaming. We picked the body up and took out its heart. We heard more creatures. We knew it was more Wendigos. Before we could look to see what happened, Scott was gone. We found a trail of blood going deep into the woods. We couldn't go after him because there were 2 more of these damn things on us. I shot one over 14 times. It ran back into the forest. I went after the other Wendigo and cut its heart out with the sharpest stick I could find. Me and Ryan waited for over an hour just sitting praying Scott would come back. Me and Scott went deeper only to find Scott's body mangled. He had no eyes. His ribs and insides were showing. We found a walkie-talkie next to his body. We turned it on and something spoke. It had Scott's voice. It said in his voice, "Help guys, it's eating my stomach," it said. We ignored it. We looked over and saw one of those little craps about 300 feet away from us. It was the one I shot God knows how many times. I ran towards it with flamethrower. I lit it up and it was screaming in agony as I was burning it alive for over 20 minutes. I sat down next to Ryan. We both said we need to get Scott's body. Then Scott sat down next to us and said, "Hey guys, I'm back." We aimed our weapons at his chest and we asked him a series of questions. He got all correct. We went home. We had slaughtered 3 Wendigos. We came back 3 days later. We brought our homemade bomb. We went into the forest for over 26 miles. We found 2 Wendigos. One of them killed Ryan, stole him and nearly slaughtered him in the forest. We then blew up the Wendigo. The 3 of us went and shot the other Wendigo with a Saga 12 in the chest, hitting its heart, killing it. The Wendigos got retaliation and killed 2 people, only a fraction of their losses. Last week it was outside my window. It had the walkie-talkie. We both talked. At first said, "Want to come out to play? It looks nice out today." I snapped back, "No, you just want to kill me." You are right, I will kill you. You look very appetizing up there. I got my AR-15 and shot it God knows how many times. It ran into the forest and it said through the walkie-talkie with Sabrina's voice she was my sister but she had been dead for over 3 years. It said alright, I will give you a choice in 1 hour, I will kill someone you love or I can have your hand. Neither. I snarled back. It then said in Scott's voice alright, I will do both. Then I locked my door and slept praying that I won't die tonight. I heard scratching in my door for over 4 hours. I screamed at my door. The Wendigo then said, if you can eat, why can't I eat also? We need so much food and right now we need food and you are my food at the moment. I waited and waited and waited, wanting this thing to get out of my house. Then it ran out of my house. It ran with incredible speed out of my house. It ran so fast that I thought that the house was going to collapse any second. Scott and Ryan went out of state to Ohio. We found more Wendigos. They had followed us to Ohio. They rammed our vehicle with such force it went flying over 600 yards away. We unloaded, shot straight onto them and did some numbers, taking out 6 of them. We had to retreat back to our town over 80 miles away. We almost died several times along the way. More killings have been inflicted, 2 couples, 4 children and 16 adults. 3 days ago my friend Ryan was found dead. Me and Scott stayed up for several hours discussing this. I was suspicious of Scott because I felt he had this dark force around him. I asked him well over 30 questions. I didn't care, I was going to spot an error. After 3 hours he got no incorrect. Over 14 hours later Scott then looked at me, he smiled and he had jagged teeth. He then said, he tasted like cherries and one day I'll taste you too. Third story. This story was shared by you/throwaway451. I'm a skeptic, but I've seen the Wendigo. I'm the sort of person who is skeptical of any claims regarding the existence of the supernatural. My wife claims to see ghosts/dead people and that she's an empath, and I'll concede that she's a very good guesser regarding other people's emotions and the history of places and families. But I can't accept her statements as fact because they're not empirically provable. With that said, you can believe me or not, but what I'm about to say is something that even I have a lot of trouble disbelieving. I can't say I've had any paranormal experiences in my life, but there are several things that happened when I was quite young that I simply can't explain. By the time I was about 12 to 18 months old, I had either a memory or a very vivid imagination of my life before birth. I was floating up in the sky, standing on thin air, with no land in any direction. In front of me was a kindly middle-aged Native American man wearing a plain white robe. He asked me if I was ready. Some kind of vision flashed before my eyes, and when I said yes, I somehow descended and experienced my own birth. Keep in mind that this is before I was able to comprehend what birth was. I also didn't know about Native Americans yet. When I was about 6 or 7, I started getting very distinct mental images of something extremely disturbing. What I saw was a tanned, mummified-looking, emaciated dead face. The eyes were glassy but somehow horribly alive, and the lips and nose were shrunken. The creepiest thing about the face was the too wide smile and a full set of very white teeth. When I was 9 or 10, I read for the first time about some expedition or other in the Antarctic where several ill-fated members of an expeditionary group died and were left behind. Their bodies were recovered in the 20th century, and the article I was reading had images of them. I had never seen a frozen body before, but as soon as I saw those pictures, I immediately correlated what I was reading with the thing I'd seen earlier in life. From that point onward, I started having almost real waking visions, in a way that's hard to explain more than just in my mind's eye, and yet not exactly as if it were actually in front of me. of something that is basically my worst nightmare. It was an 8 or 9 foot tall, I know this because its head almost touched the ceiling, frozen corpse, completely naked, with long arms and legs. It was the same face I'd seen before in my mind, with shrunken features, etc., only now it had a full body that was just as emaciated and mummified as the head and neck were. I only saw it on cloudy days in the late fall or winter, and always when it was between me and a window, so it was sort of backlit. It never made any motion to do anything, just stared down at me with that horrible grin. In high school, I got onto Wikipedia at some point and finally learned what the thing was: the Wendigo. For those who don't know, it's a mythical spirit creature in Algonquian legend. I was born in Connecticut and have about 1% Native American blood in me. From about 400 years ago, my first traceable ancestors in America came over shortly after the Mayflower, and one of them married a Native American woman. Now do you see part of why I'm so creeped out? According to legend, the Wendigo was an evil spirit associated with starvation, the winter, and cannibalism. It either lured desperate people into eating their fellow humans during the winter, or possessed those who did resort to cannibalism. There are various stories about how it looked, but most of them agree that it looks like a frozen corpse, generally taller than a human, and no, it doesn't have antlers like in all the modern depictions you'll find via Google search. It reportedly can ride on the winter wind, mimic human voices to lure the unwary into ambushes, and has a heart made of ice. Here's the thing, I experienced this before I ever identified what the creature was or knew about the legends. Only after almost a decade of intermittently seeing the Wendigo did I come across this description, courtesy of the Wikipedia article. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tautly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, the Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from suppurations of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. I've done some further research, and all of the information I found from various sources all concurs with what I saw. So, I'm remotely linked to the Native Americans with whom the legend originated. I have always had a deathly, no pun intended, fear of dead bodies, especially mummified-looking ones, and I saw a creature from their stories long before I learned that what I saw matched the traditional descriptions perfectly. I was, and still am, skeptical, but even I can't ignore these coincidences. I'm also a Christian, Presbyterian, and therefore am quite wary of any claims of ghosts or supernatural entities inhabiting the world due to my beliefs, but even so, this thing has stuck with me for years. I saw it earlier today, which is why I'm here at all. Anyone got any insight? I've considered seeking out a highly knowledgeable Algonquian person to figure out what to do, but I'm torn because I also have some reservations about that from a religious perspective. Also, I promise this post is sincere and not a fictional account that should be posted elsewhere. It sounds pretty fantastic even to me, the person who experienced it, but I can't shake the feeling that this isn't just my imagination. Edit. I forgot to mention, I was born in Connecticut and moved to South Carolina when I was about 7. I've been seeing it here in the South for almost 20 years now, even though I've moved all across the state during that time. Not sure if that's relevant, because the Algonquians are situated in Virginia and up into Canada if I understand it right, and never came this far south. Fourth story. This story was shared by u/Drasta. What I know of the Jinn. So just so you know, what I'm about to tell you isn't a scientific or even a normal viewpoint by most Western people. It's more of a spiritual explanation based on religious writings of Eastern cultures. Frankly, can't positively tell you that I believe in it, but it makes most sense to me because growing up, I heard stories from my grandma, parents and elders in general. And for the record, I'm American, born and raised, so I'm not writing you from some village in Iraq or something. LOL. So a jinn is a being not from our world obviously, but has the ability to appear to humans in various forms. The viewpoint is religious scripture in Islam and Judaism, and even the Bible describe humans beings as made from clay. Jinn are known to be made from flameless fire. When you look at the hood of a car during a super hot summer day, and it appears to be so hot that what you see right above the hood is almost like a vapor coming off of it, that's what jinn are made of. They have no sense of time and not ones who use intellect but have powers to do things humans can't. When I was a kid, someone from my family had told me not to pour hot water outside, you may hurt or kill a jinn's child. It said that there are no ghosts in this world and that anything supernatural in our world is done by jinn. Hauntings, possession, scary things in general, it's all from jinn. When a person dies, their soul doesn't stick around or anything because of unfinished business, etc. If you've read any type of religious writing, you may remember that our human world is one of several worlds in this universe. Jinn reside in one of these levels and live as humans do. In groups, communities, cities. They have their own religions similar to ours. They have families. And the craziest part is that they can see us and we can see them if they choose to show themselves. I've read they live in remote areas where there aren't too many people. Forests, jungles, deserts. I've heard they congregate near areas where water is perfectly still and they eat bones and human/animal excrement. They lack intelligence but have the power to change form and can gain knowledge of a person's deepest, darkest secrets. People have been known to gain control of a jinn and make the jinn complete various tasks for them that may be impossible for a person to do. But every story I've heard about a particular person having control of a jinn has ended in that person's eventual mysterious death. A story my grandma told me of when she was a girl, living in a small village in the Middle East. Her aunt was a lovely person, we'll call her Roxana, beautiful and desired by many young men wanting to marry her. Roxana's friends grew jealous of all the attention she was getting, especially one friend, Aisha. Aisha went to man who supposedly knew a form of black magic and with a lock of Roxana's hair or a piece of fingernail could bring harm to her. Aisha was successful in getting a piece of Roxana's hair, and a few days later, Roxana began to grow pale and thinner. She would cough blood and get feverish. This went on for weeks and months and no one could explain what was wrong with her. Her family finally went to a holy man who looked more like a crazy man, but they were desperate. And after reading a few prayers he told the family that someone had indeed used black magic to bring harm to Roxana. He asked to stay in Roxana's room alone to figure out a solution. So the night the holy man stayed over, he brought a huge suitcase with him, and my grandma, being the curious little girl, asked him what was in it, but he wouldn't say. That night, my grandma peeked into Roxana's room to see what the holy man was up to. She saw the man open the big suitcase and pull out 3 statues and put them in front of him. He began to recite something under his breath, and slowly, those statues began to blink and speak. Those statues were being possessed by jinn. The holy man would ask them questions regarding Roxana's health and how to make her better. The statues told him to go to the cemetery to a specific grave, in a specific spot, and dig a small hole and pull out what he finds. The holy man noticed the door move and the statues almost instantly stopped moving. The holy man quickly put them in his suitcase and gave the little girl, my grandma, suspicious look. So the holy man took Roxana's family to the cemetery and showed them the grave and where to dig. Roxana's father began to dig and found a small trinket box. In the box was a marrow bone wrapped in some sort of animal hide and hair, Roxana's hair. Within the marrow bone was a small piece of folded paper which had numbers written on it with Roxana's name, her father's and mother's name, and a short passage saying something along the lines of, "May she never find love, may she never find happiness, may she wither and suffer but death not greet her." Several weeks passed and Roxana started to get better and look better but never quite recovered completely. Her rosy complexion never returned and she later found out she was barren, never to have a child. The holy man was found dead several months later as well. This story was shared by you/CIA Herpes. I tried to take revenge on my husband by using a jinn. It backfired horribly. Lightning came down from the sky, hitting the man standing in the street directly in the center of his head. His wife and children started screaming from the sidewalk a few feet away, his young toddler putting out her hands towards her father and yelling, "Dada! Dada!" The mother was carrying the toddler, and her eyes were animalistic and uncomprehending as she looked at the smoking body in the street. The 6-year-old son stood next to the mother, not saying or doing anything, his eyes simply wide and shell-shocked as he kept staring at his father's remains. I was frightened the entire time, realizing how badly things were going now. This was not how I imagined things would go. The sound of pouring rain and heavy thunder gave the world a muffling effect. All I could smell was charred meat from the father's body mixing with springtime flowers and rainstorms. The combination was absolutely nauseating. I thought I might throw up if I had to smell that burning body smell for a moment longer. As if in slow motion, I saw the body of the father fall to its knees, its arms hanging limply by its sides, its face a blackened, smoking mask of fused skin and blood. The body stayed there, looking like it was praying, then mercifully fell face first onto the pavement. I knew I would see that face in my nightmares forever. His wife immediately put down the toddler, who was wailing, then instinctually ran into the road without looking. I was on the same side of the road as her and started sprinting down the sidewalk towards the family. As she stepped out into the road, a tractor trailer that had been coming around the corner tried to stop, seeing a man's body in the road, but the mass of the vehicle was far too great to stop at such a short distance. The driver twisted the wheel and, with a cacophony of shrieking metal, it began to flip. Within a fraction of a second, both the wife and the husband had disappeared from view under the ripping, shredding metal of the trailer. Sparks flew in every direction as my ears rang from all the noise. I had reached the kids and pulled them back from the sidewalk, forcing them onto the lawn directly behind it as they both put their arms out and began screaming. I don't know what the tractor trailer had been carrying, but it immediately began to catch fire, explosions rocking the street as I dragged the kids to the nearest house and got them safely inside. The resident of the house came running downstairs and I screamed at them to call the police. Later that day, I was back home. I took a hot shower and tried to forget what I had seen. It had all gone terribly wrong. I had wanted them dead, but I never imagined it would go so badly. I dried off and dressed for the ritual, entering the basement and taking out the spellbook, The Shadows of Solomon. I felt sick and scared at the prospect of having to encounter the creature again, but I knew I couldn't stop now. I was already in too deep. This book had been passed down within my family for countless centuries. Very few people even knew of its existence. My mother and grandmother always warned me to never use it except as a last resort. They seemed as terrified of it as I was. As I took it out of the safe, I felt the leathery, black cover, made of human skin. I opened the book, and its pages shone out with their radiant whiteness. I marveled at how the book never seemed to age, the pages never drying out or cracking, the cover never needing any maintenance. It was as if it were a living thing that could heal itself. I had never seen another book quite like it. Every time I touched it, an instinctual dread shot through my body. It was as if my flesh knew it was an evil thing. I wish I had listened to my instincts. I did the ritual to bring the jinn back, drawing the pentagram with human blood and chanting the proper words in Aramaic. The stuffy basement seemed to open up into something the size of a football field as the consciousness of the jinn entered. At first, it looked like a mist was gathering in front of me, directly outside the safety of the star. But it wasn't a mist at all. I knew it was smokeless fire, a kind that most people could never see unless the jinn allowed it. "A war," I said, calling the name of the jinn, and he answered. "I am here, daughter," he said, and his body solidified. He looked like a man and a snake had merged, floating above the ground. He had the body of a man, with legs and arms, but his skin had scales, and his eyes and nose were those of a snake. He had countless serrated teeth, and 3 bone-white horns extending out of his forehead. "Why did it go so wrong today?" I asked. I never wanted them to die in such a horrible way in front of their own children. He simply smiled, an ear-to-ear grin that showed his dozens of shark-like teeth. My heart pounded, and I felt infuriated and terrified at his expression. I knew he didn't care in the slightest. "What is your next wish, daughter of Eve?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension and arrogance. "I have eliminated the ones your husband was cheating on you with, the neighbors of sickness. Should I now eliminate the source of the sickness, as well?" I knew I had to be very literal when speaking with jinn. If I said yes, for all I knew, he could use that interpretation to get rid of me, if he could twist the meaning somehow to make me the source of sickness. I had known for quite a while my husband was having threesomes with the neighbors. I could never look at him the same. Not only was he cheating, but he was clearly not even straight. How could I have married such a man? It made me sick to my stomach to think about it, even now. And it was certainly no wonder we had such problems in our marriage. I knew he was the cause of all the problems. But my terror fought my hatred for control of my mind. I still had a chance to simply banish the jinn, return to my normal life and get a divorce. I knew it had gone too far, however. "I wish for you to kill my husband, without me being in any way a suspect to the police or dying as a result of whatever kills him," I said. The jinn smiled, then his body dissipated back into a fog-like substance. The room returned to a normal basement. I was just a scared, naked woman sitting in the middle of a bloody star in an almost totally bare basement now. Looking out the basement window, I saw a small, smooth face staring in at me. My heart leaped in my chest, but as soon as I blinked, the face was gone. What the hell was that? I wondered to myself. Then I heard my husband's car pulling into the driveway and slamming the door. Seconds later, he was yelling upstairs. "Mary," he said. He sounded as if he were crying. "Did you hear about what happened to the Palmers?" I quickly grabbed a bucket of water, washing the blood off the basement floor and allowing it to flow down a drain in the center of the room. I felt a rising sense of panic. He wasn't supposed to be home this early. I was just finishing cleaning up as he came down the stairs. "Mary, what are you doing down here?" he asked. I just shook my head. "Looking for something I lost," I said quickly, and we went back upstairs. We decided to go on a walk around the block. My husband, John, kept crying about the deaths. He had no idea that I knew about him cheating on me with them, however. I played the part of a supportive wife, hugging him and reassuring him. "So where are the kids going?" I asked, referring to the toddler and the 6-year-old boy, the 2 Palmer children. John shrugged. "Luke and Jenna have an aunt and uncle a couple streets down," he said. "They're going to stay with them for a while." Then I heard a soft sob from behind me. I looked back and saw the 6-year-old standing there, a huge revolver in his tiny hands. He was pointing it directly at me. I froze, a wave of anxiety going through me. "Hey, now, Luke," John said, walking towards the little boy, "put down the gun." Luke shook his head, saying nothing. He wouldn't even look at John. His eyes only focused on me. "She killed my parents," he said in a small voice. John shook his head. "No, buddy, I'm sorry, but a truck killed your parents, and that was a freak accident," John said. He put his hands up. "Please, just put down the gun and we can talk about this, okay?" He kept inching closer, then lunged for it. Luke panicked and fired a shot, which hit John directly in the center of his chest. My ears were ringing still, but I could hear John coughing up blood, the sound of fluid dripping out of his body and landing on the ground, before he collapsed. I stared down the sidewalk at Luke, putting my hands up. "We both know what you did," Luke said, and fired. Everything went black. I woke up later, the beeping of hospital equipment all around me. I tried to move, but I couldn't feel anything. My face felt flushed and hot. I turned my head and saw a nurse coming into the room. She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. "Oh, you're awake," she said. I nodded. My mouth was so dry. The nurse ran out and got me some ice chips to suck on, and soon, a doctor came in to talk to me. "I'm sorry, Mary," he said, "but the bullet hit you in the spine. You are paralyzed." I began to cry. "Also, your husband died as a result of the injury. He didn't even make it into surgery." The doctor shook his head sadly. "A terrible thing, really. The whole thing is just so sad." I turned away from him, looking out the hospital window. I saw the Jinn of War there, his snake-like eyes staring in at me, his mouth a lunatic grin of pure delight. I saw him mouth the words to me. "Only one more wish for you, daughter of Eve." Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.